Of course, other than setting up this Dev Clash and doing all of the doodads with the gacha system and all of this work, he's also obviously working on the mod that everyone else is playing. And at the moment, I think he's going to be on his way, and we'll get to
I'm
chat
here.
with him. Hello there. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Was helping people with their game, but I kind of Chrono was a lost cause.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, River Doge, tell everyone what it is that you do when you work on Anbennar.
So I probably am most well known for either the FLI content, which is pretty much anything that's in the FLI I either directly made or had a very large hand in, or the Leechman submod was the thing I was probably first known for. But I do actually do other stuff, surprisingly.
All right.
I worked on the GUI and a lot of the backend stuff for the artificery system with
Oh, very
Taters.
nice.
Taters did the art, I did the actual like GUI implementation and the actual structure for like the research system, etc.
Okay.
I have ongoing designs for religions in the valley,
Okay.
and a mission tree for Jinsho, actually.
Show that
That is
that
the
sounds
Halessi
very...
vampires.
Yeah,
They're not vampires, but they are the Zhengxi. They're like kind of like chi zombies.
Okay.
I'm not really sure the best way to explain it, but they're very interesting, I guess, is the cool part.
All right.
So their themes right now are pretty much they are like eunuchs that escaped, did some forbidden magic, and now they are eating people's souls, more or less, to stay alive. But they also have this theme about exceptionalism.
Okay.
So the tag is actually very heavily focused on internal management and like creating exceptional individuals in your society. So it's going to have hopefully have an advisor system where you create unique advisors that aren't like not quite vanilla advisors, but they might use the same kind of visual space.
Okay. That's cool.
And then the last thing, I guess, which is probably the biggest thing I'm working on right now, and it just got greenlit, is the adventure system, which I think you wanted to ask me about before.
Yes.
What? Do you have any questions?
Yeah. Can you tell me about it, please? Would be my question.
Okay.
So,
Sure.
explain how adventures work in Anbennar right now.
Well, they don't. I guess that's the simple way. So right now, the system has been kind of, I don't want to say like neutered, but it's been neutered because it just wasn't working as the dev team wanted, and they didn't have a replacement, so they instead made it kind of inconsequential.
Okay.
So right now you get like some events occasionally would have modifiers that make provinces kind of less good,
Right.
and then those modifiers go away on their own, and you genuinely don't have to interact with the system. So that's the right now.
Open your tab so we can what's called the estates. Can I? Oh, actually, I can check that myself. Though you don't have adventures, though.
Yeah, I don't have adventures. The one I don't have,
Right.
unfortunately. You can look at probably anyone like Kaless or something.
Yeah. So, yeah, adventures at the moment, from my experience and what I use them for, is I get some governing capacity from them. If I'm really struggling to the end of my life, then I'll give heroes in the army, and that's it. But there's all of this stuff with sponsoring Beast Slayers, do good, etc., etc., which I don't think anyone really ever clicks.
No one
So
does.
what is the proposed system for replacing this then?
Sure. Actually, I'm gonna get up one of my I'm gonna get my document really quick, just to have a reference. But long story short, the first thing I did when I dived into trying to do this system, and shout out to Sussurus, because he actually, unbeknownst to me, had a proposal for reworking parts of the adventure system, and a lot of what he proposed were things that I also identified as problems and possible solutions.
Okay.
So some inspiration there, I guess, indirectly or accidental inspiration.
Yeah.
And so right now the problems are the system right now has no interactivity for the player. Like you, as you said, you maybe give one privilege and that works.
Yeah.
You have no progression or rewards from the player side, right? Like the rewards you have are just the privileges that you can pick, but those aren't directly related to the adventure system whatsoever. It's just an estate.
Yeah.
You don't have real any sense of danger, and you also don't really invest in it.
Yeah.
And those are all kind of the key points. There's other parts, but really from like a top down, that is the key points that need to be hit with the new system. And so those are the first things I actually addressed with creating solutions for it. You want me to dive into any like specifics? Because I can do some specifics here.
Yeah, I mean, as deep as you are capable of saying without breaking any
Getting shot.
Yeah. without telling too much, basically, that you're not allowed to say. But yeah, I want to know how it's going to work for sure.
The proposal is actually like the doc is public info, and more or less most of it is approved. There's two key parts that are not they're not approved, but they're also not part of the MVP that we're going for, the minimum viable product for the adventures rework, because we really want to see like, does the core gameplay loop work? So core gameplay loop is going to be you have your adventures estate, which functions as a platform for representing like privileges, etc., which all tie into this GUI you're going to have. And in the GUI, you're going to have a quest board where you monitor the different threats within your country, or that are present within your country, but they can also be present within other countries too. You have your actual organization, which is the different adventuring companies within your country. So you have up to 3 companies which exist within the adventures org, which is the estate. And those companies can actually level up and grow and become more proficient at handling threats, because you can actually send them out to go handle threats instead of just having this passive they win or don't. The passive still exists, mind you, because there needs to be kind of a layer where the player can not have to micromanage anything too much.
Right.
And the only rewards right now in the MVP will come from if you reach level 10 with a party, your organization gains like a tiered bonus. And that bonus will probably depend on the type of organization you choose, because you know how we have like Artificery has the different types of organizations, Magic System has them.
Yeah.
I don't have names right now for them, but generally they'll be like a more religious themed, a more like state managed, and then like the more disorganized, which is kind of the trend.
Okay.
And then from that level, right, you have the active handling of these threats. So ways that you can actually interact pretty much boil down to you have your companies, you have the quests you send those companies on, and you have these kind of usable chance items that you can find on the adventures that give you success chance increases. Like you find like a stash of health potions, and you can send that with your party.
Okay.
This is meant to be very surface level with those. There is a greater system that is being in the works for an actual, like, we call it a reliquary, which I won't say that like the gacha GUI is like a test run of it, but it's definitely me playing around with the idea of having some sort of inventory that has abstract items that give effects that aren't just like plain modifiers.
Right.
Like for instance, one that was brought up is you could find some like bones of some magical skeleton, and it helps you become a necromancer, or some sort of like you drink from a chalice and it turns you into a vampire, etc. Your ruler into a vampire.
That's kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah, and those would be linked to the catastrophes, which are, there's 3 stages to each threat. There's the minor stage, in which they can only be handled passively by your companies. There is the quest-worthy stage, as we call it, which is when you can actually start sending out your companies to handle them. And then there is the catastrophe stage, which is like kind of a fail state, where the threat has gotten too bad in your country, has spread too much. Right now, we're kind of setting it as a quest-worthy is anywhere from like an area or 2 to a region, whereas catastrophes once it becomes like multi-regional.
Okay.
And catastrophes are going to pretty much, right now the plan, this isn't part of the approved, to be clear, but the plan for catastrophes is that they all function uniquely. So there's not like one way they work.
Okay.
For instance, there could be like you have cultists in your country who do some sort of blood pact and summon in an infernal invasion. And that's like a whole new threat that spawns in as a catastrophe and has to be handled in a very specific way, right? You might actually have to fight it with your actual army.
Okay.
Whereas another catastrophe might be some sort of like vampire masquerade that's slowly assassinating all of your internal parts of your government. And they're trying to take over your country. And it actually breaks into like a civil war or something instead.
So I imagine like a lot of these catastrophes are, they could totally work as the main thrust of it, like a D&D campaign. This is kind of what you might expect, and so we're putting this more, D&D elements into the game as well.
Yeah, so the focus on actually the first point on my document for goals is fun and flavorful D&D style adventures.
Nice.
That is the title of it, and that's something the current system tries to capture. And I do think some of the event localization is really good. Like the events are cool. It's just mechanically the system is not there whatsoever, even if the flavor is. So the catastrophes kind of exist as like you have your D&D campaign, but then you also have like what's your end goal in a D&D campaign.
Right.
And the catastrophe kind of exists as what would you have the climax of your campaign to be.
Yes.
And that's kind of the vision for it.
Okay. That's cool. I like that.
It's also where the system becomes an actual country level threat, because right now it's not meant to be like a game ending potential. But the catastrophes kind of can subvert that rule if it's needed and improved.
So, question. This very much sounds like something that, for instance, the new Sun Cult incidents sort of could work in this kind of system. Like, what's his name? The Silent as the Grave, the rise of Amusu, very much sounds like a country level, regional level catastrophe. Are you thinking of maybe rolling those into that system or no?
So part of my initial job with the MVP of this system is going to be pointing to every single thing that needs to be merged in or kicked out.
Right.
Amusu, I don't know. Like the catastrophes aren't part of the MVP, so I probably won't touch it right away. I'd have to talk to the Bulwar team if it makes sense to have Amusu become part of the catastrophe. Because he definitely makes sense. I do think that fits almost perfectly with the goal. I mean, they even have the relic system, right? That's kind of represented there, which could be merged into the GUI for the reliquary. That potentially could be part of the adventure system. So that's definitely something I need to keep in mind. There is also the potential with the new patron system that there could be some patron content related to the catastrophes, but that's a conversation I need to have with Oiris.
Right.
Nothing is approved there at all, and because neither system is done, it's really hard to know what exactly will work well between them.
Right.
But I'm excited for the opportunities that catastrophes bring, because it's like, what's like disaster content that's not a disaster in some sense.
Yeah.
Like it can't be something that would work perfectly as a disaster, because then why is it a catastrophe instead of a disaster?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I am excited for the introducing kind of like the higher level threats in Anbennar setting that we don't really get to represent because they're not a tag. For instance, the Infernal in Legions, right? Those things probably, unless Mortal gets content in 16 years, they're not going to really get a lot of content.
Right. Because
I think the Infernal Court Religion is getting content.
I feel like, especially like speaking of Amusu, the idea of this necromancer or this lich from like, eons ago is come back to life and he's going to terrorize this entire region. But nobody in this region believes in the new Sun Cult anymore because Dartax won or Jad won. So therefore Amusu's just going to stay sleeping forever. Kind of doesn't really vibe super well. But if it was a more, say, neutral element that happens, like through this system, then that would probably not matter who is in control of Bulwar when Amusu decides to wake up. So I hope that he is involved. I hope that you do get permission from the Bulwar team to pop that in there, because that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I actually that is a good point to bring up. I hadn't thought of it. I did think of Amusu for other stuff I've made because it's very cool content. I had not thought of it directly being integrated into the system though. So
I'm going to be expecting a credit in here somewhere.
Yeah, I'll in the code. I'll put one line for you.
Yeah.
Lambert said something about this question mark.
Yeah, that does me just fine. I'm happy with that.
The other part that's not entirely going to be fleshed out in the first iteration, just to kind of temper expectations. The rewards will not be crazy because most of the bonuses and actual progression will be within the system and contained within it. Right. So you're not going to see like massive power progression of the likes of the mage system, for instance. At least you won't initially see a lot of stuff like that.
Right.
Because we need to see if the gameplay loop works, and if people are having enough fun that they interact with a system that doesn't give them like 100% morale, right? It's
Fair.
hard to judge if the system's good or if the rewards are good, and you
Right.
want the system to be good too. So I'm
Rewarding
hoping to refine
without
that first.
power spiky.
Yes, exactly. There's also, Anbennar fights really hard against power creep, so I don't want to contribute heavily to that by doing the adventure rework. But I do want there to be cool stuff people can aim for as like an end goal
Yeah.
within the system.
Okay, that's cool. So, what are some examples of like incidents or these catastrophes that you're thinking of adding? Are there any that are locked down as things like, okay, if this all goes to plan, this is going to be the one that I'm excited about?
Gotcha. So I would say if the catastrophes are approved, which I lean towards, I think there's going to be some. If the MVP goes well, I think catastrophes have a good chance. If they make it in, I really want there to be a infernal sort of invasion related one that spawns from a different threat, because that's something I want to go for. Is like a lot of threats aren't exactly the same level as what they lead to, right? So you have like a bunch of undead cultists can resurrect a lich or like unearth a lich, which you could have like as an Amusu thing, right? Where you have something that sparks Amusu, though obviously that's probably not lore accurate what I'm saying. Or you have some sort of infernal cultists or like a secret society in Canor that's trying to bring about the apocalypse by bringing the infernal legions in, right?
Right.
So that's probably where I lean heaviest. Obviously, you know me, like if Leechfather was going to get content, it would certainly be a catastrophe and not really anything else. I've kind of shied away from trying to do any more content in that regard until there's like a good platform for it. And
Right.
I think catastrophes are pretty good for representing even the other degenerative runeborn. But the label is not very good because you have like cursed ones fall under degenerative runeborn, but they're literally just orcs that speak to each other in their head, more or less. But the idea that you could have, for instance, like the Silent Watchers or the Blood Feeders get content with AW would be pretty interesting.
Right. So the Leechmen are confirmed right now. The Leechmen are coming back just in the form of a catastrophe. That's what we're saying right now.
I mean, I have juggled the idea that they spawn as a tag that not just them, but that the fact that there could be releasable tags from catastrophes existing in the mod, where they can only exist under these like Easter egg kind of situations.
Okay.
I think people like content like that, where it's like, wow, I've never seen this happen before. Or, like, you have to go through these elaborate hoops to get to some flavorful country.
Right.
So it'd be pretty interesting. The Leechfather is hard to add as content into the mod for anyone else because he is like a world-ending threat. Like that's like really he has one goal and he's hungry, and it's hard to negotiate with someone who's just hungry. As I'm sure you've been, right? If you're hangry, you don't want to talk to anyone either.
I have a question from chat. Are there going to be meaningful consequences of failing these catastrophes, these adventure quests? So can, say, the Infernal Legions like take over your country, or is it like what's the end of the failure loop?
So there's depending what you lose to, right? There's different consequences. As I said before, like catastrophes specifically will be very unique in their consequences and the way they function.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to start from like the lowest level up, for instance, you fail a minor quest. Typically, the fail state of a minor quest is that it becomes a quest-worthy one, right? It gets worse. So you don't really need to worry too much about those. Quest-worthy, though, if your parties, for instance, your adventuring companies fail when they're on these quests, you can actually have significant members of them die, in which case the level of your companies go down and they become inactive for a certain amount of time. So that's like the mid-level consequence and the in-system consequence. Catastrophes, though, could vary anywhere from you get land decolonized to, I mean, if there does happen to be a breakaway tag, I mean, the consequence could be either you play as the tag or you have to fight it, and if you lose, you die, kind of thing. But one stipulation from Thor, when we've discussed this system a lot, but one stipulation from him was you should be able to ignore the AW stuff if you need to, even if it burns you, right? Like if I'm like an empire that spans even multiple continents, right, or have like a ton of super regions under my belt, I should not have to be crippled by a single adventure threat in my country. Because that makes sense, right? Like I could sacrifice a region, maybe that region breaks away, maybe that region burns to the ground and has 100 devastation is useless. But I shouldn't be game ended because of one or two regions being angry
Right.
or suffering.
Okay.
So you probably won't see something that's capable of bringing down like a unified empire of Anbennar, right? That just won't be a thing.
Okay.
But you could see something that is like a significant threat for a smaller tag. And I mean, all of your land getting 100 devastation is pretty much a game over in some cases, depending where you're at in the game. I mean, yeah.
Another question: can you brute force the quest if you don't really want to deal with it, like with manpower, mana points?
Not exactly. The active handling of quests is kind of the brute forcing, right? So it's how you level up your companies, but it's also you can send your company, and if that company fails, you send another. And the success that you've had so far on the quest will actually impact the next attempt because it will be easier the second time because it weakens the threat. It will it will potentially get worse again, but if your company does the quest, fails, but made it like halfway through, you'll see that reflected in the difficulty of the quest the second time if you go right away again with another company.
All right.
But there's no like I press a button and it's gone. Like that's too gamey, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, but I think it was a good decision from Tor.
Click button, get reward is past.
It's not compelling, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's meant to be this thing that you manage, but you don't micromanage.
Yeah.
A bit any other questions?
A bit like the Dwarven expedition system, like you.
Yeah. So when you send a quest, that's it, right? You click the button, it's out, and it's committed. You're not like going through and doing all these little micro things during the quest.
Right.
Even to like the extent, it's not going to be to the extent of expeditions where it's like these big chains.
Right.
It's mostly it's not a set and forget, but it is a send the quest and you wait to see what happens kind of thing. Multiplayer is in we have taken multiplayer into account for the proposal for the MVP. If a threat exists between two player countries, for instance,
right,
first person to send the quest against it pretty much gets dibs, but every other country that has the threat within them can choose to send help and to participate as well.
Okay.
But if you say no there, you're locked out, right? You have to wait till they fail or succeed.
Okay, that's pretty decent. Having that kind of multiplayer aspect as well is nice. You can basically help your ally with these kinds of quests as well.
Yeah, you get like a bit of a bump. You only get this if the threat's with you as well. Though I suppose I could think of having some sort of mechanic for you loaning a company to another country, which gives them like a bonus to their success chance for one quest or something.
Right.
That could be something I keep in mind. But the idea is like if the threat's within you and you want to get XP from it too, you just will both get XP. It's not like it splits it or anything. That's too it's too nitpicky to deal with. So just everyone gets experience if they succeed.
Okay. I like it. That is that's very cool.
I hope it turns out as interesting as it sounds, because like sometimes like the ideas sound a lot better than reality, but you know.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been brewing for a while.
Well, I will leave it at that, and we do in fact have a player war. But yeah, thanks for very much for explaining the adventure system. And I hope it works out to be as cool as it sounds, because
awesome.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to playing with that.
Yeah, it'd probably be a bit, but I mean the artifice rework took us like a week. Taters and I fucking powered through it, so
nice.
So hopefully the adventure system doesn't take like 3 months to do or anything like that. It'll probably take a bit longer, but
I absolutely adore the artifice system. So if it's anywhere close to the quality that we have there, I am going to be a very, very happy person.
Awesome. All right, I'll let you get to it. I will warn you, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to begin the end of session interesting thing that's going to happen. So you're going to want to... I might even tell you what player that you want to tag into for it.
Okay, yeah, for sure. All right.
I'll give you a heads up who to go visit. You'll know who to visit after a certain amount of time, but...
Okay.
But all right, for now, enjoy your player war. I know you've been waiting for one.
All right, thank you very much for joining us. That was River Doge. Yeah, no, that sounds like a really cool system, and I've always thought that. Well, I clicked on a country without them. Who? Need to click on somebody that actually has an adventure state. I've always thought that this was a cool idea. The events that you get are really cool and flavorful and really nice writing and stuff, but there was never enough there. So super happy with that being expanded upon.